You can go through an entire day without ever fully feeling like you were in it. You wake up, you move through your routine, you complete tasks, you respond to messages. From the outside, everything looks normal. But internally, something feels slightly different. It's as if there's a small layer between you and your experience. You're not disconnected, you're still functioning. But instead of fully living moments, you find yourself thinking about them while they're happening. Thinking about what you should be doing, what this moment means, how it compares to something else. And that subtle shift changes everything. Because when your attention moves from direct experience to constant interpretation, life starts to feel less immediate, less vivid, less real. You're noticing instead of experiencing. A lot of people assume that being more self-aware means being more connected to life, but that's not always how it works. There's a point where awareness quietly turns into observation. Instead of being inside the moment, you begin watching it. You notice how you're acting, how you're coming across, how the moment could be better. You're present, but part of your attention is always slightly outside the experience. And that creates distance, not a dramatic kind, just enough to feel like something is missing. Why this happens? This isn't random. Your brain is designed to anticipate, plan, and evaluate. It's constantly trying to stay one step ahead. That's useful in many situations, but in a modern environment, that system rarely turns off. There's always something coming next, something to prepare for, something to think about. So your mind stays slightly forward-focused, always leaning into the next moment instead of settling into the current one. Over time, that becomes your default state. The trap of needing to figure everything out first. Another pattern that keeps you stuck in your head is the need to fully understand what you're about to do before you begin. You want clarity first, a plan, a sense that it will work. So instead of starting, you think about starting. You consider different options, you weigh outcomes, you try to predict how it will go. And that feels productive, but in reality, it keeps you in the same place. Because thinking about an action is not the same as taking it. And the more you rely on thinking to create certainty, the harder it becomes to move. Why overthinking becomes the first obstacle. Overthinking often shows up as preparation, but it quietly becomes resistance. You tell yourself you're being careful, that you're trying to do things properly, but what's actually happening is that your mind is trying to remove all uncertainty before you act, and that's not possible. So the action keeps getting delayed, not because you can't do it, but because you're waiting to feel ready, and that feeling doesn't arrive through thinking. Clarity comes from movement, not before it. What most people don't realize is that clarity is not something you find before you start. It's something that appears after you begin. When you take action, even small action, your brain gets real feedback. You see what works, what doesn't, what feels right, what needs to change. That information is far more accurate than anything you can simulate in your head, but you only get access to it by moving. Action reduces mental noise. There's also another shift that happens when you act. The moment you begin something, your attention naturally locks in. You stop evaluating as much. You stop looping through possibilities. Because now, there is something real in front of you, something to respond to. And that pulls you out of the abstract thinking loop. You don't need a perfect start. One of the reasons people hesitate is because they believe the beginning needs to be right, that they need to choose correctly, start correctly, do it properly from the start. But in most cases, the beginning doesn't matter as much as you think. What matters is that it exists, because once something has started, it can be adjusted, refined, improved. But something that stays in your head can't evolve. A simpler way to move forward. Instead of asking, "What's the best way to do this?" try asking, "What's the simplest way to begin?" Not the most optimal step, just the most immediate one. Open the document, send the message, start the task for 5 minutes. Let the next step reveal itself after that. This removes the pressure of needing a full plan and replaces it with something much lighter: movement. How you move from thinking to experiencing. The shift doesn't come from trying harder to be present. It comes from removing the habits that keep pulling you out of the moment. And those habits are usually small. Constant checking, constant switching, constant filling of space. So instead of adding effort, you reduce friction. Here's what that looks like in real life. You stop reaching for your phone in every in-between moment. Waiting in line, sitting down, walking somewhere. You let those moments stay empty. You finish a task completely and pause for a few seconds before starting the next one. Not to be mindful, just to let your attention reset. You allow simple actions to stay simple. Drinking coffee without adding a video, eating without scrolling, working without headphones. These are not big changes, but they remove the constant pull on your attention. And when that pull decreases, your mind naturally settles. Attention needs fewer inputs, not more effort. Most people try to fix this by focusing harder, but focus doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from having fewer things competing for it. If your attention is being pulled in 5 directions, it doesn't matter how hard you try. So the real shift is this. Instead of trying to control your mind, you simplify what it has to deal with. Fewer tabs, fewer switches, fewer simultaneous inputs. That's what allows presence to return. You don't need to eliminate thinking. The goal isn't to stop thinking. That wouldn't be realistic, and it wouldn't even be helpful. Thinking is part of how you navigate your life, but there's a difference between thinking when it's needed and thinking all the time. When thinking becomes constant, it replaces experience. When it becomes selective, it supports it. Small shifts that make a difference. This is where things actually start to change. Not through big resets, but through small, repeatable adjustments. For example, when you're in a conversation, notice when you start preparing your next sentence and let that go once or twice. When you sit down to eat, try watching what's going on outside, or simply be present in your thoughts by taking that moment to journal without any other input. When you open your laptop, decide what you're doing before you open it, not after. When you arrive somewhere, don't immediately pull out your phone. Just be there for a moment. Bring a book you've been wanting to read in your bag or purse. When you're watching something, watch it, not while also scrolling something else. These are small constraints, but they do something important. They bring your attention back into one place at a time. You're reconnecting action and attention. Right now, for many people, action and attention are slightly disconnected. You're doing one thing, but your mind is on another. These small shifts bring them back together, and when that happens, your experience feels fuller. Not because life changed, but because you're actually inside it again. The feeling starts to reverse. As your attention stops jumping ahead, your experience begins to deepen. You notice more, you remember more, moments feel less rushed, and that sense of distance starts to fade. Not all at once, but gradually. If you feel like you've been thinking about your life more than actually living it, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It often means your attention has been stretched across too many directions for too long. And when that happens, your experience becomes filtered through constant thought. But that pattern isn't fixed. As your attention slows down and stops trying to stay ahead of everything, you don't need to force yourself back into your life. Through simplicity, you will naturally return to it. Quietly, one moment at a time.